When I look back at where this journey started, it wasn't in politics or even in speeches like this one. It began when I was standing at the top of my career, celebrated, respected, with everything that success seemed to promise. People saw the trophies, the victories, the applause. They thought he's made it. But deep down, I knew that part of my life had served its purpose. I had climbed one mountain, yes, but there was another, far more difficult summit ahead. It's funny, isn't it, how the world expects you to stay where you're winning, to keep repeating the same formula that brings you praise. But I wasn't wired like that. I couldn't just stay in comfort while I saw so much around me that needed to change. I had seen a system that was broken, institutions that weren't serving the people, and leaders who had forgotten why they were there in the first place. And I couldn't unsee it. So I did the unthinkable. I walked away from the applause and stepped into silence. From being celebrated in stadiums, I was now addressing crowds that barely fill small rooms. I was told this was a mistake, that politics was a different beast, not meant for someone like me, that I was naive, that I didn't understand the game. And truthfully, in those early days, maybe I didn't come from a political family. I had no dynastic name, no inherited voter base, no support from the powerful. I came with nothing but a dream, a conviction that this country could be better. And let me tell you, nothing humbles you like failure. Losing an election, watching people you believed in walk away, hearing voices mock you on national television, it can wear you down. Every failure chipped away at the image the world had of me, but more importantly, it chipped away at my own ego. You have to lead a nation. You have to lead without pride, without entitlement. You have to understand pain, not just through headlines, but through your own experience. There were nights I questioned whether I had chosen the right path. There were times I sat alone, wondering if the struggle was worth it. But in those moments of doubt, I remembered something very simple. I didn't start this journey for praise. I didn't walk this path for approval. I stepped into this fight because I believe that real change never comes from the sidelines. You have to get in the arena. You have to be willing to be laughed at, underestimated, and even hated if you truly want to challenge the system. People often talk about transformation as if it happens in a moment, but it doesn't. It's slow, it's painful, and it often begins when you step into a space where no one believes in you. I had to earn trust, not with speeches, but by standing firm through every defeat, by being there when it was unpopular, when it was difficult, when there was no light at the end of the tunnel. That's what builds credibility. Not the wins, but the consistency in loss. You know what's ironic? The same people who once said, you can't do it, eventually started saying, we were with you from the beginning. But that's the nature of belief. People only believe after they see results. The real challenge is to believe before there's any proof, before there's any crowd, any power, any sign of success. So when you hear the word failure, don't flinch. Embrace it. Let it shape you. Strip away what's not essential and prepare you for the purpose you were meant to serve. Because stepping away from comfort is not a step down. It's the beginning of something far greater. There's a strange thing about persistence. It doesn't shout. It doesn't come with recognition, applause, or even understanding. Most of the time, it's quiet. It's just you. moving forward when no one sees the point. I spent 22 years walking that path, not 1 year, not 5, 22. And every year brought its own kind of defeat. I lost elections, not just once, again and again. I'd step into the arena, speak from the heart, offer a vision for change, and still be rejected at the polls. I would walk off that stage, not into celebration, but into silence. People would say, "You don't belong here, you'll never win. Go back to where you were accepted." The media treated it all like a joke. I became a punchline. And each time I stood up again, they laughed louder. But what they didn't see, what they could never see, was the reason I kept going. It wasn't about winning a seat or gaining a title. It was about an idea that our people deserved better, that the poor should have a voice, that corruption should not be normal, that justice should not be a privilege. And if standing for that meant 22 years of being ridiculed, then so be it. There were times when those closest to me left. People who once stood by me during the easy days vanished when the struggle became too long, too uncertain. They said the system was too strong, too corrupt to fight, and maybe they were right. But giving up was never an option for me. Because if you give up on your own vision, you're asking the next generation to live without one. You learn a lot about yourself when you're losing, when nothing is working, when the crowds shrink, the donors disappear, and the media turns the lights off. You learn whether you are in it for the cause or for the comfort. And what I found over and over again was that every setback was preparing me. It was hardening me, yes, but also humbling me, teaching me that you don't change a country with slogans, you change it with stamina. I used to go from village to village, city to city, with no security, no grand convoy, no guarantee of votes, just the belief that if I kept showing up, someone would listen. And even if it was only 5 people, I'd speak to them like it was 5,000, because that's how you build momentum. Not with shortcuts, but with presence, with consistency. And still, for most of those 22 years, I was told it's impossible. Not once, not casually, but relentlessly. But I've learned that the word impossible usually just means difficult. And difficult is where most people stop. But difficult is exactly where I began to feel at home. So when people ask me, how did you keep going for so long without success? I say this, because I was never chasing success. I was chasing something deeper, something worth failing for, over and over again, until the day came when failure no longer had the final word. There's a moment in every journey where you have to ask yourself a hard question. Why am I doing this? Not the surface level answer, not what sounds good in interviews, but the real uncomfortable truth. When I asked myself that question, deep in the middle of failure, when winning felt a million miles away, the answer was never popularity, it was purpose. See, popularity is easy to chase. It gives you short-term rewards. You say what people want to hear. You make the right friends. You play the game. And for a while, it works. You're liked, supported, maybe even celebrated. But it doesn't last. Because popularity depends on staying in line, never challenging, never questioning. And I didn't come into this to fit in. I came to change something. That's why I refused to compromise on what I believed. Even when people said, just soften your message, or if you align with them, you'll gain more support. I heard that so many times. They said politics is about strategy, not honesty. But what they call strategy, I call surrender. Because if you change your principles just to get ahead, you're not leading, you're following a script written by others. And I never wanted a position that required me to betray the very reason I stood up in the first place. I wasn't here to become another face in a system that had already failed the people. I had seen what that system did, how it crushed the poor, rewarded the corrupt, and silenced the honest. And if I ever became part of that, then everything I said, everything I fought for would mean nothing. So yes, there were shortcuts, plenty of them. But I chose the long road, the lonely road, because that was the only way to stay true to the mission. It wasn't always easy. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. There were times when standing alone felt heavier than I imagined. When I saw others climb faster, gain more power, because they were willing to play by the old rules. And I was still standing there. There's integrity in one hand and rejection in the other. But that's when I realized something important. Popularity might open doors, but purpose builds foundation. And foundations last longer than applause. I wanted to build something that could endure, something that wouldn't collapse the moment I walked away. And that required more than just speeches. It required staying the course when it made no sense to anyone else. Even when I was being called stubborn, difficult, unrealistic, I stayed. Not because I was blind to the cost, but because I knew the cost of giving in would be even higher. This journey has never been about being liked. It's about being useful, about standing for something when it's easier to stand for nothing. Because the world doesn't need more people who are liked. It needs more people who are led by purpose, even if they walk alone for a very long time. When you hold on to a vision for years, especially when no one else sees it, it changes you, not just because it's difficult, but because it forces you to live with conviction day after day in silence. I wasn't chasing a trend. I wasn't reacting to what was popular or convenient. I had a vision for what this country could be. Honest leadership, a system that served the people, dignity for the poor, justice that wasn't just for the powerful. And I knew that if I let go of that vision just to make things easier for myself, then everything I believed in would collapse. People kept telling me to be more flexible, to adjust, adapt, rebrand. But I didn't want to shape my message based on the mood of the crowd. I wanted to shape the future based on principles that didn't change with time. And that kind of consistency, it's costly. You lose allies, you lose elections, you lose momentum. But if your foundation is strong, if your why is clear, then even the worst storms can't shake you. Over time, that vision started to resonate. Not because it was packaged perfectly, but because it was real. People began to see that I wasn't here to play the game, I was here to rewrite the rules. And slowly, the crowd grew, from a handful of supporters to tens of thousands, then millions. But that shift didn't happen because I adjusted my values to fit the moment. It happened because I refused to. You don't need a perfect message to inspire people. You need a consistent one. And that consistency comes from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and why you started. There were moments I felt completely alone with that vision. But those were also the moments that clarified everything. Because once you've walked alone for long enough, the noise around you loses its power. Real leadership isn't about reacting to pressure. It's about standing firm in your truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you. And the truth is, people are drawn not to perfection, but to purpose. They don't follow you because you always win. They follow you because you never quit on what you believe. The world doesn't change because of quick victories. It changes because someone, somewhere, was willing to hold a vision steady long enough for others to finally see it too. After years of setbacks, silence, and small crowds, something shifted. Not overnight, not in some dramatic, cinematic moment, but gradually, like the first signs of dawn after a long, endless night. People started listening, really listening. The same words I had been saying for years, the same message I had repeated over and over, suddenly started to land. And the same crowds that once mocked or ignored me began to gather in thousands, then tens of thousands, then millions. But let me be honest with you. When that breakthrough finally came, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like responsibility. Because I hadn't just won an election. I had won trust. Trust built over 2 decades of standing my ground. Trust earned, not through charisma or charm, but through struggle, through consistency, through showing up when no one else would. When that moment arrived, it wasn't just about forming a government. It was about proving that all those years of hardship had meant something. That this journey, full of failure, rejection, and relentless criticism, had actually prepared me to lead, not with ego, but with purpose. I wasn't walking into power as a politician. I was walking in as someone who had seen every level of this system, had been broken by it, and had survived it. I knew from the very first day that real change wouldn't be easy, that just winning a seat didn't mean the fight was over. It meant a new, harder fight had begun. The fight to transform mindsets, to build institutions that serve, not control, to shift a culture of entitlement into one of service. And in that fight, the expectations were even greater, because now people weren't just hoping, they were believing. I never saw that breakthrough moment as a reward. I saw it as a test. Would I now become the very thing I had spent years standing against? Would I compromise now that the seats were full, the cameras were on, and the power was in my hands? That was the real battle, to stay grounded, to stay aligned with the same message that had carried me through the years of loss. The easiest thing in politics is to win. The hardest is to remain unchanged after you do. But that's why those 22 years mattered, because they taught me what most people never get to learn: how to lose with dignity, how to stand alone with strength, how to speak truth when it costs you everything. So when the moment came to lead, I didn't need to search for direction. It was already built into me, carved by every defeat, every criticism, every lonely night. Change doesn't happen because you suddenly have power. Change happens when power meets purpose. When the person leading never forgets why they started. If there's one thing I want people to remember from everything I've lived, everything I've endured, it's this: failure is not the end. In fact, it's often the beginning of something far greater. I failed more times than I can count. For 22 years, I walked through defeat after defeat, through mockery, rejection, betrayal. But every time I was knocked down, I got back up. Not because I enjoyed the pain, but because I believed in the purpose behind it. What we don't often realize is that failure isn't there to stop us. It's there to shape us, to reveal who we are when everything is stripped away, to test whether our dreams are real or just empty words we say when it's easy. Anyone can be committed when things are going well. The real test is who you become when no one is watching, when no one believes in you, when all the odds are stacked against you. The truth is, I wasn't special. I didn't have a secret advantage. I didn't have a roadmap. I just had a vision and the willingness to keep walking toward it no matter how far it seemed. That's something every dreamer has the power to do. You don't need a perfect plan. You need persistence. You need the courage to look failure in the face and say, you will not define me. I know how easy it is to give up. I've been there. I've stood at the edge of quitting more times than I can admit. But every time I felt like stopping, I thought about the people who were counting on someone to not give up, to keep pushing, to keep believing. Because when you hold on long enough, your story becomes more than just your own. It becomes proof for others that they can do it too. The world doesn't change with loud speeches or big promises. It changes when ordinary people refuse to let go of extraordinary dreams. When someone decides that they're willing to endure, to sacrifice, to fight, not for applause, but for impact. That kind of strength doesn't come from talent, it comes from heart. If you have a dream, hold it tight, protect it, even when no one else sees it, even when the world tells you it's impossible. Because somewhere along the way, your persistence might light a fire in someone else. You may not even realize it, but by refusing to give up, you could be giving someone else the courage to keep going too. And that's how nations are changed. Not by those who had it easy, but by those who refused to break when it was hard. So when you look at my journey, don't see the success, see the struggle that built it. Don't be inspired by the destination, be inspired by the endurance it took to keep moving forward. I failed for 22 years. I was laughed at, doubted, and dismissed. But I kept showing up, not because I knew I would win, but because I believed the fight was worth it. And if there's one thing I hope you take from this tonight, it's that your dream, your cause, your mission, whatever it is, matters. Even if the world doesn't see it yet. Even if no one claps for you, funds you, or believes in you, keep walking, keep building, keep standing. Because the moment you refuse to give up is the moment everything begins to change.